Sometimes, we dismiss the strange and unexplainable, brushing them off as figments of our imagination. But there are moments when we can't ignore the reality of what we've experienced. This is one of those stories. It was a quiet, unassuming night, the kind of night where the air hangs still, and the only sound is the faint hum of distant cars or the occasional creak of the floorboards. Ryan had settled into his bed, pulling the blankets up to his chin, eyes slowly shutting as the weight of sleep began to take hold. The house around him was silent, cloaked in the kind of stillness that feels absolute. Then came the knock. It was faint at first, like a hesitant tap on a door far away. Ryan stirred, his half-asleep mind trying to dismiss it as nothing. Perhaps the wind or the old pipes rattling. But the knock persisted. Rhythmic, deliberate. It wasn't loud, but it had a presence. Something that seeped into the corners of his consciousness and refused to be ignored. Groggily, he sat up, rubbing his eyes. The room was dark, save for the faint glow of the street lamp filtering through the curtains. His heart was steady, but there was a gnawing unease he couldn't shake. He swung his legs over the side of the bed and stood, the cool wooden floor beneath his feet sending a shiver up his spine. The sound was coming from the kitchen. The hallway leading to the kitchen felt unusually long that night. Ryan walked slowly, his footsteps soft against the old wooden floorboards. The air seemed colder, heavier, as if the shadows around him were pressing in. A clock on the wall ticked steadily, the sound unnervingly loud in the oppressive silence. When he reached the kitchen, everything seemed normal. The moonlight streaming through the window illuminated the familiar space. The table, the chairs, the appliances. But there was something that caught his eye. One of the chairs lay on its side, as though someone had knocked it over. Ryan stopped in his tracks, staring at it. He frowned. Had he left it like that earlier? He couldn't remember. Trying to brush off the creeping sense of discomfort, he stepped forward and righted the chair, placing it back neatly at the table. He sighed, feeling silly for letting such a small thing unsettle him. As he turned to leave, a chill ran down his spine, one so cold it seemed to seep into his very bones. He stopped, his breath caught in his throat. Behind him, the chair scraped against the floor. Slowly, deliberately, the sound was subtle but unmistakable, the dragging of wood against tile. Ryan turned, his heart pounding in his chest. The chair was moving, inching across the floor as though an unseen hand was pulling it. It wasn't jerking or toppling. It was sliding, methodically, toward him. He froze, every instinct screaming at him to run, but his legs wouldn't move. His eyes were locked on the chair, unable to look away. And then he heard it, a whisper, low, guttural, and chilling. It seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere at once. "Why are you here?" The voice rasped, the words wrapping around him like icy tendrils. Ryan stumbled backward, nearly tripping over his own feet as he fled from the kitchen. His breathing was ragged, his pulse pounding in his ears. He bolted down the hallway and into his bedroom, slamming the door shut behind him. He leaned against it, trying to catch his breath, as though the thin wooden barrier could protect him from whatever was out there. But the house wasn't silent anymore. From the kitchen, the scraping sound continued. Slow, deliberate, relentless. The chair was moving again. Ryan covered his ears, trying to block out the noise, but it was no use. It echoed through the house, a haunting reminder that he was not alone. Morning couldn't come fast enough. When the first rays of sunlight filtered through his window, Ryan mustered the courage to leave his room. He crept cautiously down the hallway, every step feeling like it could be his last. The kitchen was bathed in warm morning light, and everything was normal. The chair was back at the table exactly where it should be. No sign of the night's events remained. But Ryan knew better. That night, he decided he needed proof. If he was losing his mind, he needed to know. And if he wasn't, well, he needed to understand what was happening. He set up a camera in the kitchen, its lens trained on the table and chairs. He left the lights on and retreated to his bedroom, the faint glow from the kitchen spilling into the hallway. Hours passed. Midnight came and went. Ryan lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, the weight of anticipation pressing down on him. And then, at precisely 3 a.m., it happened. The camera caught it all. The chair began to move, sliding across the floor just as it had the night before. No strings, no gust of wind, nothing visible to explain the movement. It was as though an invisible force was pushing it. And then the whisper returned. "Why are you here?" Even through the recording, the voice sent chills down Ryan's spine. It was low, almost a growl, and yet it carried an undeniable weight, a malevolence that made his skin crawl. Ryan watched the footage over and over, trying to make sense of it, but there was no explanation. He knew he couldn't stay in the house, but he didn't know where else to go. Every night since the chair moved, every night the whisper came. It didn't matter if he left the lights on or played music to drown out the sound. The scraping continued, persistent and unyielding. And now, as Ryan sits in his room, the sound of the chair moving echoes faintly in the distance. He knows the chair isn't the only thing moving in the house, and he knows that whatever it is, it's getting closer.